I just want to remind everybody to please sign in again today for CLE credit. It's at the table right in the back right. It'll be there all day today, so no need to go rush up to do it now, but please make sure you sign in for today as well. Please take your seats. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Shurat HaDin's Eyes Only Counter-Terrorism Conference. I am honored to reintroduce to you Nitzana Darshan-Leitner, the fearless leader, as I always call her, of Shurat HaDin, to open the conference today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Would like to welcome you back to the Eyes Only Counterterrorism Conference of Shurat HaDin. I'm glad that many of you made it on time, despite of the rain, despite of the terror alerts and blocking all the roads. I'm sure we all got the alert to our phone where they told us that they caught the terrorist. His name is Ahmed Khan. It's Khan with an A, not Cohn. Also, the mayor admitted that the explosion was not caused by a Samsung 7. That's a big relief. So we had a very exciting day yesterday, full of information, great speakers, great panels, and we are looking forward to have a very good one today as well. Many of the speakers today spent their entire career in engaging in confronting terrorism, so we really expect it to be a full-packed day. Let me talk to you about one recent case that Shurat HaDin is involved with that a panel yesterday touched upon, which is the fight against the social media. When you walk in the street of Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, very often you have to look back because there's always a threat that someone is coming behind you with a knife. Since October 2015, we have a wave of terrorism, new wave of terrorism, of people, Palestinian teenagers mostly, that go and stab Jews. 15 years old, 16 years old, 13 years old sometimes, they kill innocent civilians. And one should wonder, where does it come from? Where these teenagers have the state of mind to go to their mother's kitchen, to grab a knife, and to go and stab Jews. And you quickly realize that it all comes from incitement. But the incitement that used to be in the previous intifadas, in the first intifada and the second one, that used to be in the town squares when people were screaming and shouting and preaching, it used to be in the mosques, it used to be on leaflets that were printed out and given to the mass, today is going on in the social media. You will find thousands of posts calling to kill Jews, pages that called Stab the Jews. You will find videos illustrating how to stab the Jew, how to twist the knife, where exactly to stab, what type of poison you put on the knife before you go and stab, how you sharpen the knife, where to ambush the Jew, how to recognize him, how to distinguish him between others. And then all these terrorists, all these teenagers have Facebook pages where they don't hesitate to put on them posts that says, I'm going to become a shaheed. It's time to open a third intifada. It's time to liberate Al-Aqsa Mosque. Death is a right, and we demand this right. And after they go in step, you will find tens of thousands of posts admiring their act, glorifying it, encouraging others to follow them. Prime Minister Netanyahu called this wave of terrorism the Facebook Intifada, because Facebook is the most popular network among the Palestinians. The Israeli government approached Facebook officials, got them to meetings, and urged them to shut down this incitement. They asked them to close these pages, to delete these posts that call to kill Jews. But Facebook refused. Facebook claimed that they are only a bulletin board. They are not getting involved with the content. They are not going to side by any of the sides to this conflict. They are not going to intervene. So we decided to sue Facebook. And we gathered 20,000 Israelis that filed an injunction in the state court in New York, demanding that Facebook will shut down this horrible, deadly incitement, but also demanded that Facebook will be proactive, that they will monitor the incitement and will take it down, not to wait until people will alert them to it. Facebook responded. They filed a motion to dismiss. They claim that they are immune by the Communication Decency Act. This is a law from 1996 that Congress legislated in order to keep the internet open. It grants blanket immunity to servers and social media network for the content that goes on their pages. We responded back. We said that when Congress legislated this law, they did not envision this type of incitement that really will cause people to go and kill. Such type of speech that cause teenagers, cause person to go and stab other person is causing an imminent and clear danger which is not protected by freedom of speech. This is not the type of speech that's protected by the First Amendment. We also claim that Facebook is not a bulletin board. Facebook is very much engaged with their users. They push ads. They selling ads. They promote. They connect between people. They connect between those who want to kill to those who encourage them to do that. And we also claim that Facebook has the tools, the algorithm to monitor the incitement, the same way that Facebook knows what type of coffee I drink in the morning, or what I like to wear, or where I like to shop, and knows how to push ads accordingly. Facebook has the algorithm to monitor this incitement and to take it down. And lastly, we argued that Facebook does get involved. Depends to what side. And to prove that, we opened 2 pages, 2 identical pages, one call to kill Israelis, one call to kill Palestinians. And we posted similar posts on both pages and identical images on both pages, just with one difference. One's against Israelis, the other against Palestinians. And after 2 days, we asked Facebook to take down both pages. Facebook immediately took down the page that called to kill Palestinians. They sent us a firm message saying that they checked the page and it does not fit their community standards. But they left the page that called to kill Israelis standing. They said they checked the page and it does not violate their community standards. Now, Facebook has to come to court and explain all this. Let's see. when we realized that Facebook does not agree to cooperate, does not agree to turn down the assignment because they are very sure that they are immune, we thought further and we brainstormed. And we finally reached a conclusion. We found something that Facebook is not immune from, which is aiding and abetting terrorism. The Anti-Terrorism Act that I spoke about yesterday, the same law that allows American citizens to bring cases in the United States for acts of terrorism that they got injured by outside of the United States, applies to Facebook, which is an American company. We are not going to have a personal jurisdiction question this time. This law prohibits American companies from providing any type of material support to a designated terror organization. Hamas is a designated terror organization. All the attacks that happened in Israel in the past year were done by Hamas terrorists. Hamas was using Facebook to promote their propaganda, to send their messages, to recruit militants, to fundraise. They use this as a tool, like weapon, like money, like explosives. And Facebook let them do it. This Anti-Terrorism Act allows American families to sue Facebook. So last month, we gathered 5 American families that lost their loved ones or got injured in this recent wave of terrorism and filed a $1 billion lawsuit against Facebook in the Federal District Court of New York. They cannot sit in their ivory towers in Palo Alto and see the blood spills on the street of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Social media has social responsibility. If they don't want to do it nicely, if they don't want to cooperate, if they don't want to turn this incitement down, they will be compelled to do it by court. Thank you very much, and let's have a great day.
And now it is my honor to reintroduce to you Ambassador Robert James Woolsey Jr. Ambassador Woolsey is a national security and energy specialist and former director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. Among serving in numerous other positions, Ambassador Woolsey is a venture partner with Lux Capital Management, distinguished advisor for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, vice president at Booz Allen Hamilton for global strategic security, and a member of the advisory board for the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. Ambassador Woolsey is also a former Rhodes Scholar, a graduate of Stanford University, and a 1968, sorry I did say the year, graduate of Yale Law School. Please welcome Ambassador Jim Woolsey.
Damn, my age has been revealed. In 1517, a friar nailed 95 theses to the door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany. And if it hadn't been for one thing, none of us would have heard of that, and it would have been the case that those sheepskins just kind of rotted in the rain and nothing happened. But something did happen. It's called the Protestant Reformation. And it happened because of what had occurred some 50 years previously when Gutenberg invented the printing press. So those 95 theses, instead of wilting in the rain, were copied and distributed, and they hit in a circumstance in which there was a great deal of dissatisfaction in parts of Europe over the church, and particularly over what Martin Luther was criticizing, namely the sale of indulgences, sort of pay for play at the time, which was you got off scot-free as far as your religious obligations were concerned. You didn't have to lead a selfless life like Jesus or any of that. You just paid. And that was sufficiently at odds with a lot of people's thinking about their religion that within not too many months, there were millions of people killing one another in Europe over technically the difference between transubstantiation and consubstantiation in the Eucharist. But it was a religious war, and a bitter one, and a huge one, the 30 Years' War. It's what gave rise really to the reaction against theocracy that manifested itself in the writings of Locke and Hume, and which gave rise in many ways to the First Amendment of the American Constitution. Our forefathers were trying to avoid, by drafting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights the way they did, trying to avoid having more situations like the 30 Years' War. No wars over religion. They succeeded after a time, but it was a brutal and bitter experience. And what was interesting about it was that it was an invention dealing with communications, printing press, that in a way made it all happen. Then some 5 centuries or so later, another example, there was tension, to put it mildly, in Eastern Europe and particularly in Poland, and over the nature of Soviet rule. And the unrest was sufficiently building that when the Russians shut down a shipbuilding facility in Poland, there were riots. They cleared out the shipyard, and one guy climbed back over the wall into the shipyard, pulled a few people together, and created an organization by the name of Solidarity. It was, of course, Lech Walesa. Not too long after that, Albert Wohlstetter, I think one of the great thinkers on strategy and many other issues of our time, wrote a wonderful op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. The title was, "The Facts Will Make You Free," FAX. How in the world could a machine help make people free? Well, it happened because the Russians just had a very difficult time trying to figure out how to stop those huge communications of doctrine, of propaganda, of all sorts of material via the fax machines. They got onto it after a while, but there were years in which a lot of material went into Europe via fax, much of it engendered by the AFL-CIO and the CIA working together here in the United States. But the Russians saw happen that a communications medium can be your greatest nightmare. A revolution in communications can change everything. Well, the Cold War ended from our point of view positively, essentially in 1989 with the Berlin Wall going down. And I think that many Americans thought in the 1990s especially, that things were going well. We did have a serious problem with Iran and North Korea, and especially their working together on nuclear weapons and other programs. But China was more or less quiet. Russia was worried and not throwing its weight around at all. And our victories in World War II in defeating totalitarian powers, one authoritarian, I guess you'd say, Germany of the World War I era, but then three fascist dictatorships, essentially, Germany's Nazis, Italy's fascists, and Japan's imperialism. We were doing pretty well. We had fought and won the three wars, essentially, of World War II, and fought ideologically the wars of the Third World War, dealing with defeating the Soviet Union, although not by force of arms. Things seemed to be going moderately well, but they weren't. There were some very serious problems sleeping in the world of the 1990s, in which we thought that things were going to work out just fine. And those problems have now manifested themselves in a lot of ways through an aggressively expansive Russia, behaving very much like the Soviet Union on a bad day, a China that more than any time since Mao is pushing its interest in controlling its section of the oceans of the world. And the slumbering, partly slumbering, Iran and North Korea are now up on their hind legs, roaring and saying that death to America is their chief and only real dream. So we have something coming along that when we put together the revolution in communications, which we haven't handled all that well, even though we invented almost all of the technologies that are used for the new world of communications, social media and the rest. Even though that's the case, this world of new communications is something that worries us. We don't have a great idea how to deal with. A few people are doing something that's at least quite useful, as the previous speaker chronicled very well. But I would suggest that although Russia is a problem and China is a problem, Iran and North Korea are rising to a level of very, very serious potential instability, and particularly Iran. And what is our main problem with Iran, other than whenever more than 2 or 3 people from Iranian Revolutionary Guards get together, they chant death to America? I think our biggest problem is that Iran is not just a totalitarian dictatorship, it's a theocratic totalitarian dictatorship. And that creates 2 difficulties. One is it fills them with a sense of commitment and dedication. We saw that I think that Iran is a good example of another Wohlstetter comment, which is that in the Cold War, the mutual assured destruction was a deterrent. But today, with respect to Iran, it's an inducement, because their commitment to die in the cause of their religion and what is, from their point of view, sure to succeed, that death, is one of our biggest difficulties. We don't know how to deal with theocratic totalitarianism. We Americans generally, and the case is, it's also the case in Israel, are countries of religious and intellectual freedom. We don't know how to deal with someone who is theocratically committed to totalitarianism. If we were all neighbors in a portion of, let's say, the New York suburbs, and somebody new moved into the neighborhood, and we had a barbecue for him and his family, and he let drop that he was a Branch Davidian. Nobody would be likely to say, "You are? Why the hell did you give all those poor people several years ago poisoned Kool-Aid? What the hell is that all about as a religion?" Pretty unlikely. We'd be more likely to say, "Oh, Branch Davidian, well, I'm a Methodist myself, have a beer." We don't like confronting people about their religious beliefs under any circumstances. There are exceptions. There's been certainly anti-Semitism in the United States from time to time. There's been religious rivalries between the Catholics and the Protestants. But compared to most societies, our people who hold different religious beliefs get along reasonably well. But we now see a situation in which we have a growth of the totalitarian spirit of governance, particularly in Iran, and I must say I think it was substantially enhanced by what I regard as the worst agreement I can think of that the United States, international agreement that the United States has ever signed. I couldn't conceive of something as poorly drafted, as weak, and as willing to knuckle under to an adversary as the so-called nuclear deal with Iran. That, together with President Obama's backing down on the on the issue of Syria several years ago, when he committed to drawing a red line in the sand to make sure that Bashar Assad did not continue to use chemical weapons against his people, and was told, "That's a red line you will not cross." And Bashar Assad did the Middle Eastern version of making a rude gesture to us and ignored us. And the United States, through its President and Secretary of State, shrugged and left things to Assad. And by the way, on the way out of our era of seniority, in a way, in the Middle East, we lateraled the problem to the Russians and said, "You guys go ahead and take care of it if you can." Now, that has produced a situation in which we are not taken seriously by far too many people in the Middle East especially. And Putin noticed what happened when our president said, "Don't cross this red line," and then Assad crossed it and we shrugged. Putin noticed very well. So we are now in a situation where we have challengers emboldened by our own behavior, where they are theocratic in some cases, particularly Iran, and where they are taking advantage of modern communications media in ways that we never foresaw. We thought this was going to, Facebook was going to be about kids getting to know one another at college, right? You know, no, very few people, if any, as it was coming into existence, thought of it as a tool of terrorism, but it is. And those three sets of problems together give us pause. They should give us pause. We are not just in difficulties. We are in a war that we refuse to recognize. We refuse to recognize what is happening to us. We refuse to recognize what the plans of our enemies are. This is not a simple matter. It's a very difficult one. And if we have come through difficult circumstances before, the Civil War, the Great Depression, World War II, and prevailed, this time is going to really be hard. And as the country and western song goes, I beg your pardon, but I never promised you a rose garden. Thank you.
Ambassador Woolsey, I noticed that in the last few days, you have accepted to become a foreign policy advisor to one of the two major candidates. If that candidate wins the presidency and offers you a major position such as Secretary of State, head of NSA, head of CIA, would you accept? And speaking personally, I could think of no one better, more qualified.
Thank you. I am not campaigning for any job. I've had 4 presidential appointments, 2 Republican, 2 Democratic administration, Carter, Reagan, Bush 1, and Clinton. I have never been in the position of trying to say you should support X because I do, or this is my job. I don't do that. I just hang around, and if somebody needs some help and wants advice and I'm free, I'll go advise them. So I'm not campaigning for a thing, and I hope that the administration, whichever one it is, fills itself with people who can see what we are facing and what we have to deal with, and won't brush it aside the way I think the current administration has.
Thank you. Good day, Mr. Ambassador. It's a great honor and a tremendous honor to have you here today. I would like to hear your thoughts about Turkey, Erdogan, and the fake stage military coup and the dismantling of democracy. And are they really a good ally, a good NATO ally, an inconvenient ally? I would like to have your thoughts, sir. Thank you.
There are tensions definitely between the U.S. and Turkey now. But it is still a democracy with elected officials, and most importantly to me, it's a member of NATO. And there have been statements coming out of Turkey that some elements in the U.S. decision-making system were supportive of the coup. Set aside the gentleman in Pennsylvania, that's a separate question. But the United States ought to make clear to everybody concerned that we're not into coups against NATO allies. We believe that NATO is an organization, the survival of which and the continuation of which is at the heart of our ability to defend ourselves and for governments in the Middle East and Europe especially to defend themselves. So whatever tensions exist between the U.S. and Turkey now, I hope they will begin to move past us. And I also very much hope that there was not an involvement on behalf of some elements in the United States on the part of the coup attempt.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Woolsey. We have to move on because we've got to a bit of a late start. And I invite our